daddy stay. Good luck never stays a day. Bad luck's always coming my way.
For today's Grimm adventure, we find ourselves in Brownsville, Oregon. We're tracking down the filming locations to a movie known as Stand By Me. But here's the thing. It's actually going to take us a couple days to film this because it was filmed in 2 different states, and some of the locations are kind of in the middle of nowhere. We got a little bit of exercise ahead of us. So bear with us while we visit these filming locations. In fact, the very first one is right here. I just walked it. Let me show you what I mean. We were first introduced to the town of Castle Rock from right about here. Gordy's inside the store and he's buying magazines, and then he leaves the store and he walks right down the sidewalk towards where I am standing. And as he does this, the camera pans with him and you see this red building across the street.
I was living in a small town in Oregon called Castle Rock. There were only 1,281 people, but to me it was the whole world.
And as he steps into the road, you see this intersection. And then you see that building that looks like a church off to the right.
Hey, it's the
this is it.
Bob Cormier here. It's a beautiful Friday morning in Portland. It's 90 KLAM degrees and getting hotter. Up the ladder with another.
If you're a fan of the movie Stand By Me, or more importantly, movies from the 80s, there's just something very unique about the way that they would introduce their characters. The Goonies did it, and so did Stand By Me. The first time that we see the boys is in their treehouse all together. And that treehouse used to stand in that tree right there. It's on private property. We can't get any closer than this, but at least the tree is still standing. It's kind of protected in a way. How cool is that, right? I mean, you fell in love with the characters really early on with their antics and the way that they interacted with each other. It was pure magic. I remember being a kid and playing in a treehouse. We had a treehouse very similar to that in my backyard growing up in Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania. And I remember whenever it was torn down, it cut deep, The house you're looking at right now is barely recognizable, but if you see that car right about the middle of your screen, the house that's right behind it, this was Vern's house in Stand By Me. This is where he's underneath the porch trying to find the pennies that he buried. He can't find them. And this is also where we find out, or he finds out, about the dead body, the boy. Pretty much catapults the entire story.
Kid they were talking about on the radio. Brocker, or Brower, or Flowers. The train must have hit him.
Because there's so much growth on the property now, you can't actually see the angle of the house that they used for filming. But if you stand down the road a little bit, you can see those 2 windows right there. You can see that on the side of the house. See what I mean? You really can't see Vern's house anymore, all the angle that they used for the movie. But if you look right about the center of your screen at the end of the driveway, that is the wraparound porch. How it looks today. Even though we really can't line up anything with the way the house looks today, there is one shot that we can line up. And it's Vern's point of view looking out through the lattice from underneath the house while he's digging up pennies. And you can see mountains in the background. You know how the Grimm Life Collective likes lining up mountains. And for this, in this video, in the movie, the guys are standing right where Jessica is, right in the driveway.
Because he was a kid our age. 3 days before, he had gone out to pick blueberries, and nobody'd seen him since.
I think we should tell the car.
Well, he wasn't.
We're gonna tell him?
We're not gonna tell nobody.
This is the shot we get of Vern looking down the driveway through the lattice work. You can see the mountains off in the distance, the field, the street, the curve of the driveway, everything. It's right here. How fitting that there's this beautiful garden right next to Gordy's house, because in this scene, Gordy calls out to his mom, wondering where his canteen is. Dad is gardening and Mom is doing the laundry. And his dad actually says that his canteen is in his brother Denny's room. Notice I said Denny, D-E-N-N-Y, like the restaurant. But this is the house, and most of the scenes, well, pretty much everything, the exteriors were filmed from the back side of the house facing the road where we're at right now. But that's it. Gordy's house from Stand By Me.
Mom! You know what my canteen is? Mom!
It's in Denny's room.
Oh.
Sadly, we can't get into the backyard to point the camera towards where we're standing. If we did, you'd be able to see the shot from the movie, but because it's private property, we're not going to trespass. But standing right here looking at the house, you can see the steps going up to the back porch, the back door. And then if we come down here, move a little bit to the right, you can actually see the garage that can be seen in the movie. It's still here. It's all still here. Beautiful house, beautiful and peaceful, right next to the park. In this next scene, you see Gordy walking down the street, and you get a voiceover, which is Richard Dreyfuss saying that it was almost noon by the time they set out to find the dead boy, Ray Brower. Now, as he's walking, pay close attention to these two buildings and how they look towards the top. They're identical.
It was almost noon as we set out to find the body of a dead kid named Ray Brower.
Hey, Chris. Thanks a lot.
Sure thing.
Gordo. Hey, man.
Now, this Napa Auto Parts that you can see across the street can also be seen in this scene. And more importantly, it's right over here to your left on the sidewalk, on this side of the street that we're at, where Gordy and Chris meet up. Chris gets out of the car and says, "Hey, do you want to see something?"
You want to see something? Sure, what? Are you okay? Yeah, I'm fine. Come on, man. What is it?
The next location we're going to visit is the alleyway behind the Blue Point Diner. And this is where the famous gun scene took place. Right back here. And it should start looking familiar. Everything pretty much matches up. The door used to say Blue Point Diner on it, and to the right of it, there used to be a window. It's no longer there. In fact, you can see that it's been bricked over. But for the most part, everything still looks the same, including the wall on the right-hand side.
Come on, man. What is it? Come on, what is it?
The boys would have been standing right about there in about the center of your screen, aiming the gun over to a trash can that would have been right over here by the front of the car, right over here at this corner. They think it's not loaded. They end up shooting. It scares them, and then they bolt off down the alleyway this way. In fact, you can see that church steeple down there.
Jesus! Let's get out of here! Come on! Gordy did it! Gordy, let's get it! Shut up!
Hey, who did that? Who's letting cherry bombs off out here?
It's funny, growing up a fan of the movie Stand By Me, I've always wanted to visit this little alleyway behind the Blue Point Diner. I don't know what it is, it's just something about it. It's like one of those childhood memories, but this is it, standing right here. How crazy cool is this, right? Man, this is fun, this is fun. It's a small town and it's perfect. In the movie, you can clearly see some of these buildings as Gordy and Chris walk right down Main Street. This one here today is called Hex Annex. There's a little magic in all of us. But there's that building, and then right over here is the Blue Point Diner. And then there's a scene that happens right out front of the bar with Kiefer Sutherland.
Oh, man, you should have seen your face. Damn, that was cool. That was really fine. You knew it was loaded, you wet end. I'm gonna be in trouble.
Hey, girls, where you going?
Hey, come on, man. My brother gave me that.
Your brother's not very polite, eyeball. Now, Christopher.
In fact, if we stand right about here, this is as close as we're going to get to the actual shot from the movie. Now you see the door, the sign that says no minors permitted anywhere? There's a sign very similar to that in the movie. That window right there is the one that had the billiard sign on it. And then you also see the wall of the Blue Point Diner to your right. It's crazy that it still looks like this. I mean, some time has changed. It has changed, the building, but for the most part, it's still here. You can see it. Stand By Me. If you're watching this video and you're a fan of the movie Stand By Me, then this is probably the part that you've been waiting for. The train tracks, the walk to find the dead body. When I think of the movie Stand By Me, the thing that sticks out the most, the thing that I remember is the train tracks. I mean, it is, after all, a coming-of-age story about a group of boys heading out into the wilderness to find a body. Now, whenever they first get onto the train tracks, where they enter the train tracks, it's at a split. And if you see this pathway on the left-hand side that we just walked past, there used to be some train tracks there. Right now, I'm standing in the middle of the V. But if I come right over here to the other side of the scenic bikeway sign, you see this paved portion? This is the old tracks now as a bike path and a hiking path. This is the V, where they first step onto the tracks to start their journey.
Well, what do we need a pistol for anyway? Spooky sleeping out at night in the woods. We might see a bear. Or a garbage can.
Man, so much time has passed, but this is as close as I think we're gonna get to right about here. Right now I'd be standing between both tracks, and they would have been stepping onto the tracks from the right-hand side of the screen. Pretty wild, right? The boys would have been walking right in front of the camera. And hopefully you can see the split in the train tracks. The grass path as well as the paved path. A little hard to see with the sun, at least on my end. When it comes to Stand By Me, this movie is really all about the journey and the time that the kids spend with each other. And right here, this is where the journey down the tracks begins, right here at this trestle. And I think they say if they keep going straight, it takes about, what, 20 miles to get to Harlow, and Gordy says possibly even 30. But this is it. And we know that this is the right spot because there's a scene where whenever they show the camera looking down when they're walking across the bridge, you can see this like straight path. That's this way.
How far do you think it's gonna be?
If we follow the tracks all the way into Harlow, it'll be about 20 miles. Sound about right to you, Gordy? Yeah, it might even be 30.
Just before the boys get to this bridge, this is also where we find out that Vern brought a comb to the trip. And Jessica finds it amusing because this is one of her favorite lines in the movie. Vern is one of her favorite characters. And he says, what does he say?
Brought a comb? What'd you bring that for? Well, you want to look good for the camera, don't you? Or something to that effect. He's so cute. I love him in this movie.
Of course, we have to walk across the bridge, at least to the other side, to get a feel for what it was like to be in the movie. Now, I promise you, baby girl, we're not going to be walking the rest of the way to all of the other locations. We're going to drive. But this is still pretty amazing. When it comes to visiting these train track scenes, this is actually pretty cool. I mean, we got a couple big ones. I mean, if you've seen the movie, you know exactly what you're in for. And we're not the first people to do this. I mean, other people have been here, they've done different videos and they've taken pictures. But we had to do it ourselves. And of course, we had to take you with us. Now on the other side of the bridge, you can clearly see that it's a straight line, just as it is in the movie. Man, this is just blowing my mind. Now, we're not going to be hiking 20 miles down the train tracks in search of a body, but we do have to hike a little bit because the next scene is probably, I don't know, a couple hundred yards up this trail. And it's the perfect day for it. Let's just say that.
Lovely trail, and it's been a long time since I've seen a place, or rather been walking in a place that had so many dandelions. I've been behaved, I've been just appreciating, but every time I walk by I go
like the entire walk you've been doing that.
The entire walk. So I figured I'll get it out of my system. I'll do one, just one, and I've picked out this one right here.
Grab
Ready?
it. Yep.
They say that when you blow a dandelion, it spreads the seed so that more grow.
For a second there, I thought you were going to eat it.
I think that's how you're supposed to do it, really up close.
All kinds of movie magic was happening here. They had the boys walking one way, then turning around and walking the other way. Everything they could do to get the shot. But we're still on the old train tracks, and right now we walked up to these old electric boxes. I wouldn't call them old, but here on the trail, we haven't seen anything like them. And I think this is where the boys sat down to count their money, to pull their money, as well as where Corey Feldman's character tries to dodge the train. It all happened right here, and we're gonna point it out.
Have done will travel reads the card of a man. A knight without armor in a savage land.
If I pan the camera over to the right, you're going to see a pretty large field, and it might look like this is the way that the camera was pointing in the movie, because while the boys walk down the train tracks, you can see what appears to be an open field as well as a mountain off in the distance. It's a pretty wide shot, but I don't think the camera was pointing this way. In fact, I think it was pointing behind me. And I say something similar because this is as close to the shot that we're going to get. And in the movie, I think the cameraman was further back behind me into the field, pointing the camera this way. Now you can see those trees behind Jessica. Those are grown today, but back then they didn't look like that. You can actually see the mountain range behind them, especially over to the left, and how in the movie it comes down and then it kind of flattens out. This is the shot today. So much growth. Actually, if you walk down the trail a little bit, you can get a better look at the mountain, how it slopes down from the left and then just kind of plateaus out to the right just behind these trees. Again, the trees weren't there whenever they made the movie. Instead, it was more of an open field.
Have done will travel reads the card of a man. A knight without armor in a savage land.
Now let's walk over to the tree line for a closer look. Those trees that were just behind Jessica, like I said, they weren't here whenever they made the movie, but you see this fence? See the wooden pole right there? And if I pan the camera down this way, you can see these wooden posts sticking up. They look very similar to the ones you see in the movie. And then remove all these trees behind them, that's where the field would be. And then the train tracks right over here. So you see what I mean? You can kind of get a little turned around just looking at this place. But like I said, if you know where to look and how to look, everything just matches up. And there's one more thing that tells us we're in the right spot, and it's a house. And Jessica actually pointed it out. It's back there. It's kind of hard to see right now because of all the trees, but there's a house down there, right about there. You can see that pretty much the entire time this scene is happening, whenever the boys are sitting down on the tracks counting their money, as well as whenever Corey Feldman's character stands up and he decides, well, he's going to dodge the train. Now, bringing the camera over this way, you can see where Jessica is standing. That's about where Corey Feldman was standing. And if we come up here, right about here is where he would have been standing, pretending to shoot the train as it's coming towards him.
Get off the tracks, you're crazy.
Train dodge. Dig it.
Come on, man. Come on. No, come on.
About this time, Charlie and Billy were playing mailbox baseball with Ace and Eyeball.
Well, would you look at that? Once again, we find ourselves in the middle of the street, this time for a little bit of mailbox baseball. This house right here is the house, the first house that they hit, the first mailbox that they destroy in the movie. And you can see it as they drive past it after decimating the mailbox. In the movie, you can clearly see that the house belonged to the Roslins, and the mailbox is long gone. But how interesting that it looks like there's a mailbox post still here, almost like a nod to the movie. Crazy, right?
You
As they hit the mailbox, they drive right past the house, and it happens so quick, but if you pause it just right and pay attention to the house and the garage that's behind them, this is what you see. It's all still here. It looks a little bit different, but it's all still here.
About this time, Charlie and Billy were playing mailbox baseball.
After they destroy that first mailbox, they gear up for another swing, and as they do this, you can see this wooden fence behind them. There's another mailbox right there. You see this tree. They pass by it real quickly as they head on down this road, just, killing these mailboxes. It all happened right here. This is called Huston Road. This entire scene, the entire game of mailbox baseball would have happened on this road heading right down that way. This one here survived, or maybe they replaced it.
Hey, Vern. Looks like your mom's been out driving again.
The building that's behind me is where they filmed the junkyard scenes in Stand By Me. This was Castle Rock Salvage. We can't get on the property. They have no trespassing signs everywhere. And here's the fun thing about this. I hear a dog off in the distance, and all I hear in my head is Chopper, sick balls. And you know what? Even if we could get on property, things have changed so much, there's really nothing to see anymore. There's nothing that we can line up. But we could at least walk up to the gate here. Got signs everywhere. Stop, no visitors beyond this point, no parking anytime, posted, no trespassing, keep out. So I'm guessing at some point they had people just walking on property and taking liberties. But this is it. Castle Rock Auto Salvage. It's just crazy to think that this is still standing, that it's still a salvage yard after all this time from them filming to today. Got some old cars back there. Just standing here, I can hear the movie in my head. I could be wrong, but I'm guessing that there's a gate or something in the back, because from standing here at the main gate, it looks like everything just kind of took place in the back by the woods. Don't know for certain, nobody's around. If there was, I'd ask somebody, but nobody's here, it's just me. What's with this movie filming on busy roads? It's almost like they had to shut down the entire town to make this movie. Now, here's the thing. During the junkyard scene, Gordy takes the money that the boys pulled together and he heads to this country store to buy food, because everybody forgot food, but Vern brought a comb. It's the most important part. So he goes inside this really cool country store, and we get this flashback scene where he's sitting having dinner with his family. He's remembering his brother. That country store is no longer here. Instead, it's now an empty lot.
Things have changed a lot over the years, and I'm a little sad that the general store is no longer here. It looked like a really cool place to go, and I was hoping that I could take you guys there. But that's also part of history.
Now what's sad about this, the establishing shot for the country store, baby Goal, it was so tight you really can't see anything, like trees or mountains or anything like that. The closest thing you see is on the right-hand side. It's like right across the road is some bushes. And you can kind of see this little pathway. It's almost like a driveway leading up to where it once stood.
Some old concrete, yeah. We really are in the middle of nowhere, so this must have been a general store for a lot of the residents around here. It's sad to see it go.
It's crazy because, like, looking behind you, you can see this indent where the building once stood.
A KLAM news break. We interrupt to bring you an update on the search for the missing 12-year-old Ray Brower. The police have expanded their efforts to include Mutton, Durham, and the outlying areas.
And this is how Ace Merrill's house looks today. We get a shot from right about here. You can see the telephone pole on the left-hand side in this shot. It's a vehicle turnaround, but right about the center of your screen, right here in the foreground is where Ace and his friends were sitting around. Bright, beautiful, sunny day, kind of like today, and giving each other cobra tattoos. We get a bit of a close-up shot of the guys getting their tattoos from right about here. The house, for the most part, looks the same. Just that addition on the back is what makes it look different. But the windows up top, near the point, they're spot on.
Tell you how they're gonna find him. 10 years from now, some hunters.
I think this is the best vantage point that we're gonna get looking at the side of the bridge, and I can't believe that I'm standing here. This is wild. So freaking wild. Before we start lining up shots, let's walk up to the barricade and get a POV shot across the bridge. I'm gonna point out a few different things. The first one being this. In the movie, the kids are walking across the bridge to right where Jessica and I are standing. We know this because of two pieces of landmarks. Now, if you look at the bridge itself, on the right-hand side, you see how there's a bunch of wooden planks just jutting out? You can see those in the movie, but when you watch the movie, they're on the left-hand side of the bridge, which means they're facing this way. They're walking towards us. Also, if you look at the far, far end of the bridge, you see that the cliff side where you see that little bit of dirt, that light tan color between the trees. You can see that as they're walking across this way, and that's also, it could also be seen as the train comes around the corner towards the bridge. How crazy is that?
Get up, Vern! Damn it! Get up! Come in! Get Vern! Get up! Come on, man!
Just standing here, just being here at this bridge, not even going on it, is kind of like a childhood dream of mine. I loved this movie growing up, and I always wanted to cross this bridge. So even though we can't go across it, just being here, this is truly something else. Oh, baby ghoul. Obviously we can't walk across the bridge, but if we could, would you?
I was brave enough to do that at the beach where Lost Boys was filmed. Not the Lost Boys bridge, but one near it. And that gave me high anxiety. This is a lot higher and a lot longer. It looks just as old. I don't think I could muster up the courage to do it. I don't think so.
How cool would it be if we heard like a train whistle right now?
That would make it worse.
Right?
That would definitely make it worse. I'd be terrified, yeah. I'd probably break my ankle or something trying to run. Yeah.
I think this is as close as we're going to get to that actual shot. It's a close-up shot of them jumping, but it's right here. You can see how it matches up. And then we get a shot that's very similar to this as River Phoenix and Corey Feldman run to the edge to make sure that their friends are okay. Oh, baby ghoul, I just noticed that somebody actually wrote "Stand By Me" on the blockade here. Probably the only thing I've seen so far. I'm sure there's others, especially over time, but this one's still here. All right, so here we go. Here's our analysis of this scene. Basically where I'm standing is right beneath where they jumped from the train tracks. And we think, it only makes sense that right where Jessica is laying down is where they landed. You can see the rocks behind her as well as to the left, and then a little bit to the right. And then there's some erosion on the hillside, but you see down there by the water, those two trees right there? You can see those two trees in this scene, which means if we come a little bit closer over here, right there is where Gordy and Vern landed. At least they know what time the next train's coming.
Found a couple more graffitis of "Stand By Me." That one and the blue heart here. I'm sure as we walk around the barriers a bit more, we'll find another.
The fun thing about this, if you look, and sometimes you gotta look really close, but you'll still see "Stand By Me" written all over this bridge. When it comes to the Grimm Life Collective, Jessica and I both have been lucky enough to visit some iconic locations and talk to some iconic people in the movie industry. And you know what? It's things like this. This bridge is famous to pretty much anybody who grew up in the 80s. It's iconic. And we're standing here right now. Right, baby girl? You know what? I don't think I've shown any of these signs yet that are here inside Brownsville. The state of Oregon loves their film history, and they have these historical signs throughout at various filming locations, like we saw when we did Goonies, and here's this one here for Stand By Me, 1986. The sign right below it says, "Did you know the park in front of you is the location of the film's Blueberry Pie Eating Contest, which featured nearly 100 Brownsville residents as extras. After filming, the production donated picnic tables for use in the park." If I remember correctly, pretty much this entire scene took place inside a tent, like the pie eating tent. And I'm sure you know this, but here's a little bit of a reminder, a refresher, if you will. Gordy is telling the story about the pie eating contest. This is where it took place. It was a campfire tale.
And before Bill Travis knew it, he was covered with 5 pies worth of used blueberries. Boss man Bob Cormier took one look at Bill Travis and barfed on Principal Wiggins. Principal Wiggins barfed on a lumberjack that was sitting next to him. Mayor Grundy barfed on his wife's tits. But when the smell hit the crowd, that's when Lardass's plan really started to work.
What you're looking at right now is a production drawing from the day of filming, the placement of everything. And looking at this, pay close attention to where it says stage, and then where it also says audience. Now, look towards the bottom. You see the parking lot with the cars? And then right here, the direction says north is to the right. Well, here I am right now standing in that exact parking lot. In fact, you can see some of the rocks that were in that drawing there. And if I turn the camera over this way, we are parked to the right, north, which means when they made the movie, right over here in this grass is where they had the stage and the audience set up. Pretty neat, right? Fun thing about this park, it's really not that far from the main street in Brownsville where they did most of the filming. You can actually walk around town and come down here, have a picnic, eat some pie, and then go visit the rest of the filming locations. It's a nice little peaceful spot in the town of Brownsville. Sometimes I like doing these 360 turns because it kind of shows you the lay of the land, how everything looks. If we were to keep going up that road right there, it takes us to Teddy's house, as well as Main Street in Brownsville, where they did most of the filming for Stand By Me. Right over here, past the stop sign, you'll find Pioneer Park, where the pie eating contest was. And then if we were to keep going around the corner, right down here, the house in the center of your screen, that is Gordy's house. And then right in the middle of it all is the stone and plaque that says, "Dedicated to the pioneers who blazed the Oregon Trail." And there you go, mixing history with film history. I remember whenever I was a kid playing Oregon Trail on the computer. And the only thing I really remember from it, aside from the really crappy graphics, I mean, looking back, they were crappy. At the time, it was probably really cool. But I remember family members dying of the strangest things, like, I don't know. Dysentery, run over by a bison, ate a raw cupcake, threw an egg at your sister, gouged out her eye. I don't know, things like that. It was one of the most comical times of our childhood, if you grew up in the 80s. Yeah, Oregon Trail. It scarred a lot of people. In the movie, when the boys fall asleep in the woods, Gordy has a dream. He actually dreams of his brother's funeral. Well, where they filmed that funeral scene is pretty much in the middle of nowhere. It's at the end of this road, and we found it. We are going to drive the rest of the way up to the cemetery, but I just had to stop and show you guys this because it's so simple and yet so beautiful. The cemetery really isn't that big. But it's absolutely beautiful because you have these panoramic views everywhere you turn. Now, where they shot the funeral scene is right over here. Let's see what I mean once we get over here. I'm going to line up the shots. I think, well, pretty much right where Jessica is standing is where the funeral was held. You can see all the tombstones behind her match up. It looks like the camera was a little elevated, almost like a crane shot, like looking down. But this is it.
Should have been you, Gordon.
This always cracks me up about movies, like finding filming locations. The location scout, the location manager that's in charge of finding all these places, I always want to know the story behind them, because this cemetery where they shot this, it's such a small scene, is so far removed from everything else, it feels like. There's just nothing here. You see what I mean? There's just nothing around. And right in the center of nothing is the cemetery. There's just something so relaxing about being out in the middle of nowhere. Hey, look at that. Right now we're about 20 minutes away from the train trestle scene from Stand By Me, and we're in search of where a water tower once stood. There's a scene in the movie where their stomachs are rumbling as they're walking along the tracks heading to the Royal River, and they pass this gigantic water tower. It's massive. I don't think it's still here. There might be some remnants of it where it once stood, but I think it just deteriorated over time. We're gonna try to find it. Behind us, you can see parts of the old railroad. And I got this crazy glare on me because out here, there's snow. Like, I'm in ankle deep snow right now. It is something else. What a thought. But right now I'm standing right where the train tracks once were. Are you throwing snowballs? She's throwing snowballs at me. Whoa, God, that's like knee deep. I'd say we probably parked about 100 yards behind us, and we're just walking where the old tracks were, seeing if we can see anything. But this is definitely where it once stood, where they filmed Stand By Me. We truly are in the middle of nowhere, trying to find this old water tower. This is a bit of a hike, that's for sure. I'd say at this point, we're probably about 150, 200 yards from the main road where we parked. And we're kind of cheating a little bit. We know exactly where it's at, well, where it once stood at least. We'll find out once we get there, because we have the GPS coordinates of it. It's in my pocket. So we should be coming up on it.
Toward the Royal River. The reality of Ray Brower was growing and kept us moving despite the heat. For me, the idea of seeing that kid's dead body was starting to become an obsession.
And there it is. So right now we're walking on the tracks, or where the tracks once stood for the movie Stand By Me. And this is the scene where they're walking to Royal River. And right over here to the left, just past these trees, you're gonna see the lumber. This is where that giant water tower once stood. Crazy. So the top part of it that held all the water, that's gone, but the support beams are still here. Right now we're just walking around it, seeing if anybody wrote Stand By Me anywhere on these support beams. Not seeing anything. Standing here in this exact spot, lining up the shot, is actually pretty easy, but some time has passed. Those two trees to the left of your screen, those weren't here whenever filming took place, and the water tower, only 2 rows of the wood remain. There's actually more. And it's kind of deceiving because it's around like a circular water tower on top of like a square platform. And right where Jessica's standing, that's the direction that they would have been walking. It's a pretty freaking cool scene. Simple, but it's the journey. A lot of times these locations are cool, but just like the movie Stand By Me, it's all about the journey. This might make it a little easier to see where the water tower once stood. As you can see, there's only 2 rows of the wooden supports that still remain, but you can see where the other ones were. Pretty crazy. I mean, the fact that this still remains at least, you gotta come out and check it out. In fact, on Google Maps, there's a location for it. The Stand By Me water tower. So let's see here. The water tower is right there, and if I turn the camera right down this way, you can see where the train tracks used to go. That's the way that they were walking, the direction that they were walking. And we parked about 150 yards up this way, which means we got to walk back. But we had to come out and take a look at it, especially if we're up this way. And like I said, this is about 20 minutes away from the train trestle scene from the movie. One of the most iconic scenes from any movie that came out in the 80s. I mean, you think Stand By Me, it's the scene you think of. This one here, it's a lot smaller of a scene, but still, it's still pretty cool to be standing here.
No way, Ace! Not this time, man! No way!
Go for it, Vince. Go for it.
Oh, yeah?
I don't know why this is, but it seems like every time we do a film and location video, I always find myself standing in the middle of the road. This road right here in real life, it's known as Royal Avenue, and it is busy. Every time I try to get out there to get a shot, a car comes by. Every time, this has proven to be one of the difficult parts, and that's just to stand in the center of this road and point the camera that way. In the Game of Chicken scene, Ace and his friends are driving down this same road that I'm walking right now, the same direction. And we know this because when they first see the truck come over the hillside straight ahead, you see all these different telephone poles on both sides of the road, as well as that barn that's behind the trees up there. Now, we know that this is the spot because of this particular telephone pole right there.
No way!
It's known as Royal Avenue.
Oh, yeah?
All in all, it's just a quick spot on the tour, but it's still part of the movie, so we had to stop and kind of capture it, or at least try to. Hopefully we did. I think we did. At the very end of the journey, the boys head back to town, and this is the shot that we get. It's a bridge that goes directly into downtown Brownsville, and it symbolizes the end of the journey, changing in lives. I think it's one of the reasons why we love this movie so much. I mean, especially to me, it's a coming-of-age movie.
Somehow the town seemed different, smaller.
It's at this point of the story where the kids come back to town and they're heading home, and Vern walks across this intersection right here, and this is the same intersection where he finds the penny in the road. The corner looks a little bit different, but the building is still the same.
Penny.
Whoever had the bright idea to put a penny in the crosswalk in a busy intersection it's beyond me, because this place, we've been waiting for an hour to film this. A quick walk by, I'm gonna walk back out there to show you guys how it looks in the pavement. But it's a busy road. And I just don't get why. I mean, they should have put the penny like on the sidewalk or something like that, right?
It would have been safer.
And here's a quick close-up of the penny in the crosswalk. It's there. You can come visit it, but be quick about it. Be safe. Teddy walks up the driveway to his house, which is this building right here, singing his song as he goes home. Once we see Teddy walking up the driveway to his house, Gordy and Chris turn and they walk down Main Street, this direction right here. Now look to your left. You see that Coca-Cola sign painted on the brick wall? It's still here. Hey, look at that. You don't see advertisements like that anymore. It's nice to see that they still have it here and they kept it up. It looks good. When it comes to Stand By Me, there are 3 locations that everybody talks about, that everybody wonders about, but nobody has been able to capture. Or if they did, they get the location wrong. That is where they built the Leech Pond, where they had the campfire scene, and ultimately, the whole purpose of the movie, where the body was found. We just finished a walking tour of the property with the owner, who took us to each of the spots, and we can confirm that yes, they built the Leech Pond back here, the campfire scene was back here, and where they found the body was back here. And he even pointed out where they built the railroad. And of course, we're going to show it all to you. And it's in this far back corner of his property. Now, he was telling us that whenever he bought this place, there were trees everywhere and shrubs almost up to Jessica's waist. And I think he said he took out, what, 29 trees in all? And he works consistently to cut this grass and make it like a park. His family has had weddings back here. Can you imagine having a wedding where they filmed Stand By Me? Well, in the movie Stand By Me, right where she is standing, this is where they built the Leech Pond. They dug the hole and they filled it with water. And this blows my mind. You can see it's kind of like a clearing and how it's a little sunken into the ground, even after all these years. And I say that because when the homeowner bought this property, he spent a lot of time filling it with dirt to just kind of level out his property, but that's where it once stood.
Hey, you know, it's not that deep. You can walk across.
Walking back here, we also stated that the property owner took out a bunch of trees. A lot of them were either dead or they weren't doing too well, but he kept the strongest ones. He kept the healthy ones. And a few of these trees can actually be seen in the movie, like these 2 trees on the right-hand side of your screen. Now let's walk through this scene. The Leech Pond was built to the left-hand side of your screen, right there in the grass. Now, from everything that we've read, from what we've been told, that they filmed the campfire scene basically on the edge of the Leech Pond, or at the very least, partway inside the Leech Pond before they filled it with water. That puts these 2 trees right next to it. Now in the campfire scene, you can see Chris, River Phoenix's character, right up against this tree right here, and they get up a couple different times. And this is where you have that emotional moment. Doesn't it kind of look like at one point there was a road back here? It's long, it's flat, it's straight. There never was a road back here. To the left, we got the actual river. To the right, we have where they built the Leech Pond. This is where they built the railroad tracks that they filmed here on this property. We get a couple different shots of the boys walking along the train tracks in the same direction Jessica is, and behind them, you can see the river. Pretty wild to be standing here, huh? I'm sorry, to be walking the train tracks here. You know what, baby girl? We're about to see a dead body.
Coming through the woods, I bet we saved over an hour.
A lot has definitely changed over the years, but right now, where I'm walking is where the train tracks were. And the boys can be seen on both sides of the tracks looking for the body, and it's Vern who actually spots him first. And where he spots him, where they filmed the body scene, is right down this embankment, close to the river. Just standing here, I can see the movie. But at the same exact time, things have changed so much. Water level has changed, trees have fallen down. But the property owner was saying that the body was laying right about there. I look over, baby goal, and you are sitting exactly like you were in an earlier part of the video with dandelions.
This time it's grass seed.
What do you think of our time here up in Oregon, well, California, Northern California and Oregon, tracking down Stand By Me? It's been hot.
I'm a bit sunburned, but I'm not really mad about it because it's so peaceful and beautiful here. And I love nature. I grew up in nature, so it's a little bit like going home.
And with that being said, thank you for joining us on another Grimm adventure, this time telling the story of Stand By Me, ending it right where the body was found. Until next time, happy Halloween.
Wherever I come, bad luck is coming my way. Wherever I go, hard luck is there to stay. Good luck never stays a day. Bad luck's always coming my way.